One of the things I wish developers and publishers did more often is to embrace DLC and spin-offs of the main franchises. Video games, much like the rest of any media with storytelling, are full to the brim with vast worlds, lore, and an infinite number of stories that can be told outside of the main protagonist's journey. Thankfully, the Metro developers actually went and played around with this. Even if the DLC chapters of Metro Last Light were very short, they still gave us some insight into what was happening during Artyom's journey. So for a game the size of Metro Exodus, they could only knock it out of the park with 2 multi-hour long campaigns. The Two Colonels is the first of the 2 DLC chapters for Metro Exodus. It works as both a midquel and a flashback between the Taiga and the Dead City chapters of the main campaign, showing you exactly what happened to the Metro citizens of Novosibirsk on their final days. And the way this is told and shown to us is very interesting to say the least. So let's get started. For this chapter, we get to see the story from the perspective of the titular 2 colonels. We play the flashbacks as Colonel Slava, one of the top authorities in the Metro of Novosibirsk, his story being told in the present to Colonel Miller by his son as he retraces Slava's steps 3 months prior to the Aurora's arrival. These are not happy flashbacks. If you thought Moscow had it rough after the war, the people of Novosibirsk was living on borrowed time. The radiation was so severe that not even the underground metro was safe from its horrors. So much so that a special medicine called the green stuff was distributed on the regular to help the citizens survive the inhumane levels of radiation. But after the New Year celebration and the reality of the metro slowly getting overrun with biomass, the inevitable was just around the corner, leaving Slava with no choice but to venture further into the city to find a map that could reveal the location of a much safer place for him and his son. And those are just the basics. There is not enough words to do justice to the story in this DLC. It is emotional, tragic, and best of all, we get to participate in it firsthand. One thing me and countless other Metro players always wanted was for this story-driven franchise to have a speaking protagonist. Voice actors and writers do their best to deliver you an awesome experience, but characters monologuing can only go so far. So you can imagine how happy I was to see that in this story, Slava actually has a speaking role. Being a colonel, you actually get to see him talk to his men, issue orders, have proper two-way conversations with the people around him, and more importantly, you get dialogue choices too. Slava has a lot of things to say about the situation around him, and the hardship that comes with being an authority figure and having to make some rough calls, along with worrying for the future of his son. This gets even more of an impact to the story as things eventually spiral out of control and the entire system collapses, leaving Slava having to fight for his life while also making sure his son doesn't get killed. One small twist in this DLC is that while the main campaign was semi-open world with big hub maps, here the developers went back to basics. The story and its levels are a return to form, more linear but still with a major emphasis on survival and resource management. Since the metro is collapsing into war, it means the crafting system is still there, but this time around it carries its own thing. The crafting materials for the guns is now more scarce than ever, and so are the crafting tables, turning the act of finding one as a true moment of relief, since even on normal difficulty you have to account for every bullet. Of course, to mitigate this and not get overwhelmed, the game gives you a flamethrower as your special weapon, so along with the materials, you are also relying on fuel. And it is more than necessary, as on top of the monsters, you also have the biomass eating away at the metro, becoming just as dangerous as the mutants themselves. Gameplay-wise, there's not much else to say that I didn't already cover in my review of the main story. It is essentially like the more linear levels for the main campaign like Yamato or the Dead City, especially the Dead City, since it's taking place in the same area just 6 months earlier. But for a place named the Dead City, Novosibirsk was still full of life at the time of its collapse. This brings back one of my favorite and most beautiful things about the Metro games, the atmosphere. To pace out the shooting and the more horror-oriented segments, you get to see the final days of the station. Novosibirsk is just as lived in as the metro stations of Moscow. Wherever you look, you can see people trying their best to survive and also make the most of what they can. There is emotion here, there is tragedy, Coming from the main campaign and even before the inevitable happens, you can already tell the writing is on the wall, and it's already being corroded, not just by radiation, but by the corruption of bad leadership. And when everyone is living isolated together and cornered by a limited supply of life-saving medicine, the people eventually notice, tensions rise, and before you realize, all hell breaks loose. I think a funny aspect about this DLC is that it may be doing a far better job at being a military shooter than the actual military shooter genre itself. You are being put in a situation where you are one more soldier in a bigger conflict, with the bigger kicker being the harsh reality of war. It doesn't matter who you are or how good you are at surviving. You are not going to make a difference in a battle where your side is getting overrun. For all the big talk about military rank and the honors of being a soldier, when bullets start flying and the men are dying left and right, you are going to be at the mercy of the enemy and also the chain of command. And facing the mutants of the irradiated city doesn't help much against the sense of helplessness. Even when armed to the teeth with guns and all the ammo you could scavenge, there is a deep feeling that you are at the mercy of any mutants that decide to make a meal out of you, or are simply looking to get rid of the yet another intruder in their territory. The true beauty of the two colonels for me is the story arc being told. If you play through the main campaign, you come to realize that the two titular colonels are really not that different. I think it was a genius idea to have you play from the perspective of a man who truly believed in his rank and his superiors. One that, just like Miller, has to learn the harsh way that following orders blindly can only come at a great cost, and both men get to truly understand what it means to be a father. I wish I could say more, but that would be entering into spoiler territory. This DLC is short at about 3 to 4 hours, but it is well worth playing, to both have a return to basics if the open world of Exodus wasn't your cup of tea, and to also remind us of the fantastic emotional writing we all love this series for. One more thing I do love about the Metro games that is also in this DLC is that despite its linearity, the game has a lot of little freedom in it. See, most games will usually give you a hovering icon, a minimap and some dialogue box telling you where to go and how to do it. Metro doesn't do that. At most, it will give you a compass and an ammo counter on your HUD, and to get to the former you have to put away your gun, so you end up doing what I like to call gaming with your eyeballs. Without a marker prodding you along the way, you become more and more aware to the environment around you. When you are paying more attention to your surroundings, you notice little details. Details that will tell you, hey, it's this way, and it's really starting to get me to disable HUDs and minimaps in any game that allows me to do that, because it lets you actually observe and enjoy the visuals and actually get immersed into the game world. Not to mention that it also fuels your intuition because you end up thinking by yourself more often rather than having to rely on the game telling you what to do. With everything said and done, the Two Colonels is a fantastic addition to Metro Exodus. I really wish more games did little extra chapters like this, give you a chance to see the world from multiple perspectives, and actually give you a main character who has something to say to the people around him and the situation he is in. This is why I am more than happy to give the Two Colonels a well-deserved and very perfect 10 out of 10. The beauty of DLC like this one is that it motivates you to replay the main story and take a good look at the places you visit and know that they've been recontextualized. It also makes you appreciate the main characters even more, as you can see how their own story reflects against the DLC characters, and it also adds that extra emotional layer of sadness, hope, and humanity that makes me love this series above most of its contemporaries, where in order to justify its combat, it writes humanity as nothing but monsters. I don't really like that kind of notion, especially if your game is trying to tell a meaningful story, because people are far more complicated than simply mindless violence. Not that there's anything wrong with enjoying blasting enemies in the face for the fun of it, but still, there can be just as much fun when you are in a situation where fighting for your life and doing things you don't want to do add to the drama and the tragedy of your character. Makes you empathize more with him, and better yet, it makes you care. Care in a way that media like books, movies, and TV shows can only wish they could accomplish.